Good morning, traders. How are we doing today? I hope you guys are all doing really well. My name is Jason Krutzky. It is a pleasure to be with you this morning. It is Tuesday morning. We had a bit of a nasty day in the markets yesterday. From all accounts, from what I could tell, obviously, well, I guess, it depends on how you were positioned, right? Over the weekend, we talked about, and maybe you guys saw this. What's up, Debashish? How's it going? Good to see you. I hope you're well today. Good morning, Mighty Soldier. How are you, man? Hope you're well. Over the weekend, actually, let's take a look at this. Over the weekend, last Friday, I noted something in our market update, our weekly market update. Every Friday this goes out. If you look, let me remove a few little items here. These are all left over from my market update. If you look at the Qs, what do we got? We got new highs made. I guess this was what, last Wednesday, Tuesday? The 22nd. We had new highs made relative to those February highs, and take a look at what's going on RSI here. We've got RSI decreasing, so you've got some bearish divergence, bearish RSI divergence. So it's, the strength is weakening into these new highs. Not exactly what you want to see into new highs. You want to see these things moving in tandem. If you make a new high in price, you want to make a new high in RSI. So this was a warning shot for the Qs that potentially this move might be losing some steam. If we go to the SPY, we see something relatively similar. And now, again, I need to remove some items. Again, these are all items from that blog. But on the SPY here, we've got some higher lows. March 13, we put in a higher low relative to these December lows. And what do we see in RSI? We see a reduction in RSI. So RSI is making a lower low while price is making a higher low. This is what we would call a hidden bullish divergence on SPY. So this is showing a little bit of strength underneath the hood, right? It's a little bit different than the Qs. If we go to the IWM, we get just the opposite. And again, let me remove these guys here. We get just the opposite though, right? Bullish divergence. We've got price making new lows while RSI is climbing. So into these new lows, we've got strengthening going on. So you've got a bullish RSI divergence on IWM. You've got a bullish hidden divergence on the SPY, and you've got a bearish divergence on the Qs. And what we concluded from these three setups was that there was a potential for a shift in where market participants were going to be putting their money to work. We kind of alluded to the fact that we might see a rotation out of tech into the IWM, into some of the components of the IWM that maybe have sold off the most. Obviously, banks are the first thing that come to mind there. So we look at something like Bank of America, had a huge day yesterday, rallied off the low to the tune of a couple of bucks, really. I mean, you're talking about 26 and change at these lows. What's that to 28? It's like a 10% move. Yeah, almost a 10% move from the lows on Friday. Pretty impressive move from BAC. We could pop through a few more. I actually didn't look at all of the tickers, but again, a very similar move on Wells Fargo here. Probably about 7%. I'm just using the percentage measurement tool right here to gauge or to read kind of what's going on there. If we go to JPM, just kind of want to see what the big boys did. JPM had a 5% move, so Bank of America really kind of the big dog there. So kind of interesting to see this rotation that we thought might happen. It's only one day, so there is nothing confirmed about this, but it's just interesting to see that that's what's going on and that we were kind of getting that signal towards the end of last week. Now, I'm kind of curious. We've got some folks here. Where are you guys tuning in from? What's your names? Please say hello. I would love to get to know you guys and get to know kind of where you're from. And also, maybe most importantly, where is your head at today and into this week? How are you positioning yourselves? What are you trading? I'm curious about everything. I'm curious about who you guys are who are tuned in right now. I want to know more about you. So please get in that chat. Tell me more about you. You know, my role here this morning, anyway, is really just to kind of answer any questions that you guys might have about the platform. We could take a look at some charts. If you want to take a look at some charts, we can look through some of the periphery tools. You know, we can kind of do whatever you guys want to do. I don't have a real agenda here. It's almost like I'm just hanging out, and you guys are here with me hanging out. If there's anything in particular that y'all want to take a look at or want to scan through or hunt for, whatever it may be, I am more than happy to assist with that. But first, your names and your locations. Where are you guys? Mighty Soldier, where are you at? Debashish, where are you at? Are you guys just not chatting, or is my chat not working? I cannot tell. While I'm waiting to hear from you guys, I'm going to jam through a couple of these bank charts. I want to kind of look at what's going on there. Matthew Rosa. What's up, Matt from Connecticut? Apple and AMD. Yeah, let's take a look at both of them. Now, there was something that I saw on Apple that I found to be very interesting. Let's see if I can grab it. Oh, nope, not analysts. Never mind. Let's just do this. Remove it. Insiders. So this is kind of interesting. This Jeffrey E. Williams. This guy's the COO of the company. It's a big sale here. $30 million worth of shares. 188,000 shares for a total value of $30 million. And now he sold these things on March 21st. Essentially the day before the new high. I would call this the new high, right? Oh no, he sold them on the new high. So this guy, you know, it begs the question. You've got a guy, you've got the COO of the company selling into new highs, selling into strength. Begs the question, if this company is so strong, what's he doing selling? You know? Now, it doesn't mean necessarily that it's all bad, right? Insiders, they say insiders only buy for one reason, because essentially they think the stock price is going to go up, but they sell for a multitude of reasons. You know, maybe he's got another house to buy, or maybe he's got some things to pay off, or maybe he just wants to cash in and get some I don't know. We don't know his reasons for selling, but it is interesting. This is the first big insider sell since November of last year, so almost 5 months since we've seen a big insider sell like this. And this is not a small amount of money. You know, 30 million bucks, that's not a small amount of money. Looks like back in October we had a fella, Luca Maestri, the vice president, senior VP. He sold 176,000 shares for 27.5 mil. Deidre O'Brien, senior VP, sold 25 mil. Catherine Adams, senior VP, sold 25 mil. So, you know, this is kind of interesting, right? We have these insiders that have very high ranking in the company, and they're all selling approximately the same amount of shares. Looks like Catherine sold 181,000, Deidre sold 176, Lucas sold 176, Deidre sold, that was 8. That was a smaller sale. And then Jeffrey here sold 188. So this could be like a compensation thing. This could be maybe like his pay. We don't know for sure, but it's interesting. I wanted to highlight it. So let's talk about kind of where Apple is. Let's see here. I'm going to use some of the auto analysis tools first, just to kind of gauge and see what those are saying. You know, when it comes to charting, it's very easy to have bias come into the picture. And sometimes I like to just throw up these auto analysis tools like the auto trends and auto fibs and these sorts of tools before I do any of my own personal analysis, just because sometimes they're going to see something that I won't see. The first thing that I noticed, though, just like we noted on the Qs, you've got that bearish divergence. You got new highs being made here with lower highs being made on RSI. So that's something to be mindful of. That could be that it's definitely suggesting weakness under the hood. Now, whether or not it ends up playing out, it's hard to know, right? Let's throw up some chart patterns here and see if there are any going on. I'm kind of curious to know if this highlights. Okay, it didn't highlight what I thought it might highlight. Yeah, so I mean, the big thing to me is that you made new highs. And for anybody who's familiar with me, or if you've tuned into these before, I'm a trend guy. So I really care a lot about making new highs and higher highs, higher lows, or lower highs, lower lows. So that's something that I'm pretty mindful of. And that's what this did so far. It's made a new high relative to your October highs, October last year, relative to your February this year highs. And for me, I would probably draw a horizontal around 155 bucks. And I would be keeping my eye really, really closely on that level. I like the closes. I like to use closes more than highs and lows, opens and closes. So that's usually where I'll draw lines, is on opens and closes. It's just a personal preference. Excuse me. So for me, 155 looks kind of important. If we throw up a 200-day moving average, you know, they say nothing good happens under the 200-day. Apple's one of the strongest in the bunch. We're above the 200-day moving average. It's tested it twice and held it. So all things even, you know, you got to keep that in mind. We're above the 200. I want to throw an anchored VWAP from the highs. We're above that too. There's a big spot. If we take everything else off and we just look at that anchored VWAP from the highs, this represents our average buyer from the highs. Where do they own Apple? And our average buyer from the highs owns this thing at 153. So that 155 to 153 area is really important. I know that there were a lot of traders talking about 150 level, you know, months and months ago when we were trading quite well below it. Folks were talking about 150 being the line in the sand for this particular name. And that's not an unreasonable assessment to make. If you throw a line at 150 and you look at how price action reacted, it's pretty clear, you know, back in 2021, summer 2021, it was having trouble getting through it. We broke through it. We came back into it. We held it in March. We broke below it. We rejected. We managed to gain it. We held it, and then we rejected. You could see kind of how price action has respected that area. So the next piece that I think it's important to kind of look at, you could back test, you could utilize the strategy tester to test some of these conditions. You know, one of the first things that I think of is like, what does Apple do when it's above its 200-day moving average? How does it tend to react, or how does it tend to act? It's just something that you can very quickly test. And whenever there's a condition that's really easy to test, I kind of tend to want to quickly test it. So if we do that real quick, I've got the strategy tester open here. I'm just going to say price close greater than indicator, simple moving average 200. And then on the exit side, I'm going to say we're going to get out if price closes below it. And if you guys need me to explain this more, I know I'm going through it pretty fast, but so we're long. Essentially, we're going to be long when price is above the 200. We are not in this trade. We're just getting out of our long when price falls below it. I'm going to test this on the daily time frame. I'm going to look back as far as I can and run this trade. And so this is just going to give us an idea of how Apple tends to perform above its 200-day moving average. That's all I really want to know. And we could go and we could add conditions to this and make it, you know, fancier or what have you. But the reality is sometimes the simplest ideas are the best ideas. Now, not every simple idea works on every name. You know, you might have to go and dig around and find simple conditions that work for a particular name that you're interested. But this is a really good example of a very simple strategy that works really well. In fact, this works if you were only long Apple above its 200-day moving average, you would actually do better on your in your performance, you would do better than if you were long Apple from its, from 10,000 candles ago, from 26 years ago. So your performance, pretty insane, 104,000% versus 95,000% on the asset. On the right-hand side here, the tabular data, there's just kind of a breakdown of the performance of the strategy. And what I want to highlight first and foremost, if anybody here is familiar with the strategy tester, I got to highlight the fact that there is no-go highlighting. So just right out the bat, this very simple strategy on Apple, it not only works well, not only beats buy and hold, but also it's a pretty safe strategy to run in the sense that there is no-go highlighting. If we try this on another name, I'll show you what I mean. But no-go highlighting is essentially designed to alert you to the fact that there is a fundamental flaw in your strategy. Anytime you run a strategy test, when you get your tabular data results back, if there's anything that's highlighted in red, that's going to be a no-go piece of data, meaning there's something fundamentally wrong about that data that you need to fix in order to feel comfortable and confident running this strategy. So in this particular instance, there is no-go highlighting, so there's a pretty safe strategy to run. Not too many trades, 51 trades over the course of 26 years. Your win rate, it isn't even that high, 41%. I mean, it's a good win rate, but it's not massive, right? Your loss rate's 59%. The thing that makes this strategy work so well is these values here. So your average win percentage against your average loss percentage. Notice the very wide discrepancy there. You're 74%, or rather, on average, you make about 74% per trade, and on average, you lose about 3.79%. So your average return boils down to 28.32 with a risk reward ratio that is absolutely massive. I mean, 19.57, that's a huge R value. So yeah, pretty interesting stuff. If we were to go to something like, let's check NVDA. I don't know what we're going to get here. And apologies for the lines. So again, kind of the same look on NVDA, actually pretty interesting. NVDA does quite well with this very simple strategy as well. No-go highlighting. Let me go to something else. I don't know, PTON. Something that I know is not going to work well. Yeah, so here you go. So this would be an example of no-go highlighting. And these values here on the right-hand side, these are the adjustment in they're called change metrics. So from one strategy to another, the last test that we did was on NVDA. We just ran this test on Peloton. And then these values here are the difference in the results from NVDA to Peloton. So you can jump from one name to another and get a decent understanding of how they compare to one another. So anyway, getting back to your question about Apple, to me, the strategy kind of says it all, right? The strategy tester tells us what we need to know. This thing above its 200-day moving average has a tendency to perform quite well. So where my head would be at on it, especially for like a longer term time frame, I don't know what time frame you're trading. If you want to talk about a smaller time frame, we certainly can. But somewhere in this area between that 150 spot, between the anchored VWAP from the high, between the 200-day moving average, this is the area where I would be looking for potential longs, and kind of the area to trade off of. If I were long right now, then I would be looking for this area to hold if price came back into it. If you were to see something like this, a break below it, then I would be very concerned about when price came back to it of rejecting and then continuing to fade lower. But for right now, our friend Brian Shannon says, it's innocent until proven guilty. And right now, it's above a lot of key things. It's above that 150 spot. It's above the anchored VWAP from the all-time high. It's made new highs, new shorter term highs, and making higher lows, and it's above that 200-day moving average. So pretty healthy looking stock here, probably one of the more healthy looking stocks out there. And that's not a surprise, right? It's Apple. It's one of the most traded names. Let's take a look at AMD real quick. Oh, Matt, you said you love the weekly chart. We didn't even look at the weekly, but yeah, I mean, hard to argue with it for sure. Again, on the weekly, I'd still kind of be looking here at somewhere like that 154. As a price action guy, I'd be looking for them to maybe come back in a little bit, but you know, depends on your time frame. Let's take a look at AMD. I haven't looked at this in a minute. AMD coming into those previous highs. So this is where things could get a little sketchy. Let's take a look at Anchored VWAP. All right, so up and over the Anchored VWAP from the all-time high. It's a good look, I would say. And not only did they gain it, but they actually back-tested it last week, and they held it nicely too. So now they're just going inside this week. They're kind of consolidating. And, you know, will this turn out to be distribution? Will it turn out to be accumulation? This sideways inside bar, it's hard to know. Our strat traders, I don't know if Mighty Soldier's still in the house, but strat traders would tell you can't really take a trade here. You would have to like wait for the break higher or lower. Of course, it's only Tuesday, so we have a long week ahead of us. But let's take a look at the daily too. I kind of want to see this thing if it's above. Yeah, so it's above its 200-day by quite a bit, actually. Yeah, so the only thing that I see, let me throw up as a price action guy. I really like to utilize zigzag. And the reason why I like zigzag, sometimes it can just smooth out. Really what it's meant to do is it's meant to smooth out all of the rough individual candles and just give you the basic trend that's happening. You know, for many, it's probably very easy to see, but if you ever feel like you have trouble identifying kind of where pivot highs and pivot lows are, zigzag is a great way to do that. And so one thing that I look at personally as a price action guy, I'm always looking at relative highs, relative lows. Are we making higher highs, higher lows? So in the near term, definitely making higher highs, higher lows. However, if we look back to this low, we lost this low, right? They traded below it. So we made a new low relative to this one. And so then what we want to do, as far as trend is concerned, we want to look at this high because that's the high that this low brought us to, right? So we look at this high and we would anticipate, because we made a new low here, we would anticipate a failure up here. We would anticipate that price would not get above this high. So for me, I would be looking for either maybe some more pullback to something down here. I'm not exactly sure. But either some more pullback to maybe take a long up to this spot, or I'd be looking for price to get, what does it do when it gets there to 105? I guess it's a decent spot to maybe give it a go if you're super bullish here. I guess on the daily, so one thing that is also kind of interesting, and then what kind of sets it apart from Qs or Apple is that you don't have that divergence on the daily, on that RSI divergence. You actually have alignment there. You made a high and then you made a new high, and RSI is telling that story as well. So that's actually good. You know, that speaks to the strength of this move. It says that there maybe isn't that same weakness that we see in Apple or that we see in the Qs. Now, begs the question, can AMD gain? Can AMD continue to gain if the Qs are weak? And that I don't know. You know, you'd have to. I'm not even sure. Unfortunately, that's something that would not be able to be tested on the platform. You cannot test. You cannot put another ticker's conditions in as conditions for like I couldn't put in QQQ conditions to test something on AMD. One thing that kind of attention grabbing for me on the Qs outside of that bearish RSI divergence. We're going to go big time frame here. We're going to go to the yearly. And this to me is really, really important. You know, take that with a grain of salt if you want to, but this to me is very important. You have your 2021, this is your 2021 yearly candle. This is the open of 2021. So in 2022, what do? We lost the 2022 open, we lost the 2022 or 2021 open, and we lost the 2021 lows. So we made new lows relative to the 2021 lows. When you do that, what trend kind of dictates is that at some point when you make a new low, you're going to go back and test kind of where you lost. And where did we lose? Well, you could argue that maybe we lost the low. You could argue that maybe we lost the open. Where are we testing, or what have we tested now? If we go to a smaller time frame, we can kind of see how those two levels have played. Right here, back in May of last year, we had, when we first lost those two levels, we came back and we tested, and then we gained, and then we made a new low. And we continuously, we just keep on testing that 2021 yearly open. That's a big spot, and it's going to be potentially very hard to get through. Again, you know, kind of like what we talked about with Apple and AMD too, coming up into these areas, for me, it's difficult to take longs because I know that they're important spots, but also because I know that they're important spots if we're able to push and get through them. Maybe we target somewhere up here. We target taking out these highs because you have to assume that they've got a lot of stops. There's a lot of people who are short against these highs. So you figure there's a lot of stops. They maybe run price through them, and then they come back and test. And then the key is, what do they do when they come back and test? If they do that at all. Now, another alternative is that they just continue lower here. If they end up failing, then that could be problematic. We don't really know what they're going to do, but we just know that that's a pretty important spot. If we go to Bitcoin too, I know we're not talking crypto right now, but the reason why I want to bring it up is because Bitcoin is at the literal exact same spot. It's at the 2021 open, and not only is it at that same spot, but it kind of rejected perfectly off of that spot too. You can see how important that spot was back historically, back in June of last year. They bounced it almost perfectly before they failed it, and now they're rejecting. This is very classic. Old resistance becomes new support. Old support becomes new resistance. Well, that's exactly what it was. This level, this $29,000 level, was a key support spot back in January of 2021. Key support spot in between the two highs. Key support spot when we started really breaking down back in May of last year, and now it's acting as resistance. Not a huge surprise to see this, but it's something to keep in the back of your mind for your positioning. And again, how is a name like AMD going to perform with Q's weakness? We know that it's kind of bucking the trend relative to Q's for now. It's stronger than the Q's are. It's even stronger, you could argue, than something like Apple. But how can it perform if the Qs don't perform? If the Qs continue to slowly drag lower, how can other tech names perform? Just something to keep in the back of your mind, something to think about. I can't tell you about trimming. I can't tell you what to do there, but yeah, something to think about. Bertha Moreno, what's up? Good morning from Cali. Thank you for being with us, Bertha. It's a pleasure to have you. I hope you're doing well today. So, Matthew, does all that kind of answer your question? We could also look, another thing to think about, and this runs totally counter to everything I just said. One thing to think about is seasonality and how these stocks do tend to perform historically in this period of time in March, in April. And if we look at seasonality on AMD, your second strongest performing month of the year is April, looking back to 19. Oh, well, let's go back farther. Let's go back as far as we can on this. So strongest performing month of the year. And by strength, what I mean is the way that we are deriving this value, we're calling them positive periods. So that means the monthly candle closed green. So 69% of the time April closes green on AMD since 1973. It's a long time. There's a lot of history. That tells you a lot, right? That April has a tendency to be the best performing month, the strongest performing month of the year historically. And then it kind of starts going downhill into the summer. It gets pretty nasty in September, October, and then it kind of starts building some strength again. So interesting look on AMD there. We could go into unusual options. You know, the idea here is, the idea behind the platform in general is to provide you with like all the tools you need to make a nice, well-rounded decision about what you want to do. Technicals are wildly important, but they're, in theory, they're maybe only one part of the picture, right? You have unusual options, you have seasonality data, you have analyst estimates, you have insider trading, you have all of these tools that you can use to gain understanding of a stock at any given time outside of just its technicals. So, you know, I personally would encourage you, play around with those tools and, you know, allow them to kind of help you build out that picture. I'm sure that if you're trading, you're probably using some periphery tools to do just that. And the whole idea with TrendSpider here is you don't really have to go elsewhere to go figuring out everything you want to know about a stock. Pretty much everything you want to know is going to be inside the platform and attainable and available to you in some way, shape, or form. And we can look at unusual options positioning. One thing that I really like to do, obviously, this is a big picture view. You're looking at all unusual options. Well, the past 200 orders, unusual options orders, but you're taking into account a huge expiry period, anywhere from March of 2023 to January of 2025. You're taking into account a lot of different premium sizes, anything from $25,000 up to, in this case, $1.5 million, and that's gonna gauge depending on sheerly how the sizing of those premiums at any given time. And on the strike price, you're talking about anything from $25 to $150. So this thing's trading. What's AMD trading? $95. You know, generally what I'm going to do is I'm going to whittle down my strike price by quite a bit. You know, let's talk about just near term, something that is reasonable that we could actually see happening. Good morning, Sonia. How are you? Hope you're well. So on the strike price, you know, $80 to the downside, $100 on the upside. On premium with unusual options, generally I want to utilize them. I want to look at big ticket items here. So I'm usually going to filter out some of the smaller premiums, maybe $250,000, maybe start around $250,000, something like that, and see if we hover all of these, we can very quickly see what excuse me one second. Sorry, guys. We could see what the expiry was. We could see what the premium was, what the strike price was, just by hovering over these circles. And the size of the circle is going to be our gauge for how big the order is. So we can make some very general assumptions based off of just simply what we see without knowing anything else about the orders. You know, you can know where the money is relative to time. If you look down at the bottom of the, I believe this is the y-axis? Is the y-axis the horizontal one, or is the x-axis? I sometimes forget. But in the near term, looks like most of the unusual options positioning is more bullish leaning at the very least. These are all calls. But then as you look further out in time, you have quite larger size puts. So, you know, maybe more bearish leaning into the summer, maybe a little bit more bullish leaning just in the very, very near term here. And again, you can adjust these expirations, you can adjust the premium sizes to kind of get a bit more of an understanding of what might be out there. But just by looking at the dots, you can kind of gauge how the money is positioned. Now remember, keep in mind, this is the most recent 200 unusual options orders. So every time there's a new one, the one in the very back gets taken off the list. Something to keep in mind on a very volatile day when a lot of options orders are coming through the pipe. You know, these things may change quite dramatically. And then you have a list down here at the bottom to see the most recent ones as well. So that's kind of my thoughts on AMD and Apple. It only took 30 minutes. What else, guys? Anybody, how many TrendSpider users do we have here? I'm very curious about that. And maybe even more specifically, do we have any non-TrendSpider users? What's going on the queues right now? I kind of want to see. Ooh. Nasty little sell-off this morning, huh? If we have any non-TrendSpider users, what are you waiting for? Why are you on the sidelines? Why are you not a TrendSpider user? Let me give you some encouragement. For anybody who is not yet a TrendSpider user but is interested in becoming a TrendSpider user, here's a 35% discount code for you. Just click that link. 7-day free trial. No reason not to at least give it a go. Rashad, you use it every day. What's up, man? That's awesome. I'm so glad that it's working out for you. Do you have a favorite tool? Do you have any questions about anything? Do you find yourself having any trouble using any of the tools, or do you find yourself kind of focusing on one tool or a number of tools? Q's getting rocked here, huh? I wonder what's going on with IWM. From what I could tell, wow. I mean, look at the relative strength. It's just crazy. IWM opened gap down, but already kind of filling that gap. Q's just getting rocked, taking out yesterday's lows. Not a good look for the bulls. Oh, I'm sorry. Not just yesterday's lows, but the 24th lows too. So it'll be interesting to see. Oftentimes when a big low is taken out, a big important low like this one, oftentimes you'll see some sort of bounce. So it'll be interesting to see if they're able to run this back up and bounce it, because again, you assume lots of stops below these lows. So you look for a little bit of exhaustion in selling. I wonder, kind of looks like, nope. So now what do we do? Unusual options tags? Oh, you mean on data flow? Gotcha. Yeah, so the purpose of the tags is to give you an idea of how of the way that these options were purchased. So if something was purchased at the bid, it means that the all right, I come in with a bid of $1, right? And I want to buy 100 options contracts at $1 a piece. If they get sold to me at $1, and I put in a bid for 100 options contracts for $1 a piece, and they get sold to me at that price, that means that I bought them at the bid, right? If I am just trying to, that means that I am calm about my positioning. I know what price I want to pay for it. I'm not willing to pay $1 more for it, and somebody sells it to me at that price, right? Does that make sense? If you're buying something at the ask, then I want to get into something. I want to get into, QQQ puts right now, this second. How much do they cost? They cost $1. Okay, I'm going to pay that. That means that I bought them at the ask, right? A sweep is going to be where somebody goes and buys a bunch of different lots of orders. So there's a person here selling 100 at $1. There's a person here selling 100 at $1.05. There's a person here selling 100 at $1.07. And I want all of them. I buy each one, they're unique orders. That's going to be a sweep. So a sweep is like multiple orders. And presumably, and I have to admit, I'm not 100% certain about this, but the difference between a sweep and a trade would be a single order, whereas a sweep would be multiple orders to build one full position. And of course, in the money, out of the money, I'm sure you understand if you're trading options, I'm sure you understand the difference between in the money, out of the money. If you don't, let me know. Actually, for anybody who doesn't, in the money, if a stock is trading at $10 and I buy $9 calls, right? I think it's going to go up. It's trading at $10. I buy a $9 call. That's an in the money call. If it's trading at $10 and I buy an $11 call, then that's an out of the money call. Does that all make sense to you, Rashad? I've never had to explain that before, so I apologize if it wasn't as proficient as it could have been. Q's really selling here, huh? So the bearish or bullish tag is just a gauge based off of the type of trade that it is. So it's looking at, if you're, let me see here. Like, let's take, for example, what's this one? I'll look at Ali here. Let me think about this for a second, my friend. At the bid. And these are 23 puts. Where'd it go? Hold on one sec. Dang, so many came in. Hold on. Let me see if I can find that one again. All right, here it is. So you had 1,000 puts. These are the 23Ps. When did those come in? So they came in this morning. Oh. Huh. Sorry, fella. I'm just trying to kind of decipher what's going on here with this. So let's go 22. And they are for, said they were for May, right? I'm going to do one thing real quick. They might have just removed themselves from our list here. Presumably, the idea here is that these were probably sold. That's what I'm thinking, is that, so if you have a bunch of puts sold, then you're presuming that that's a bullish positioning, right? So that's how something that is, that's how an order that is considered to be bullish, but is a bunch of puts. That's how that an order like that would be labeled that way. But it looks like they have removed themselves from our list, so it just means that more unusual options orders have come in elsewhere throughout the market. But what I'm kind of struggling with here is finding them on my list here. I'm almost certain they were 23 puts. Oh, here it is. This is what it was. This is it right here. You know what else we might could do? Let me try something here. Nothing there. Tell you what, Rashad, let's do this. Are you on Twitter? If you are, follow me on Twitter at Krutzky Trades. Hit me with a follow on Twitter, and I'm going to circle around with our dev team and clarify exactly what you're asking here with them, because I want to make sure that I get you exactly what you're looking for. And since I have a little bit of, or I'm lacking a little bit of clarity on it myself, so I will hit them up, and then I'll circle around with you. If that works for you, sir. I appreciate the question very much. It's always good to highlight something that I'm not even 100% certain about. But that's what this is all about. It's all about learning. So guys, I've got only a few minutes left. Does anybody have any other questions? Any other curiosities? Anything else you're interested in? Anything else you want to look at? Good deal, Rashad. We'll get it figured out. And I think just generally speaking, the positioning, it's just how they're positioning and what the trade is suggesting. So if they're selling a bunch of puts, then it's likely a bullish positioning. If they're selling a bunch of calls, it's likely a bearish positioning. If they're buying a bunch of calls, then it's, of course, likely bullish positioning. If they're buying a bunch of puts, then it's likely bearish positioning. The neutral reading is kind of interesting, though. It doesn't suggest, it could be, neutral reading could be more like range positioning, expecting a stock to go sideways. But I'm honestly, I'm not 100% certain about that. So I want to clarify that. Actually, let me ask right now. Don't mind me. I'm just asking the dev team your question real quick. Yeah, I mean, it's a reasonable question, Rashad, for sure. It's a reasonable question. I've just reached out to the dev team, so I'm going to ask them, I've just asked them, and I will hit you back as soon as I have an answer. Maybe he'll respond to me now. Sometimes he's very busy. So kind of like what we were saying might happen here. As soon as they broke the lows, you expect some sort of bounce because now they've made a new low. It looks like that's what they're trying to do. Little descending wedge action. Failed descending wedge. Yeah, I don't know if anybody has played around with this data flow widget, but it's actually really cool because you can see this stuff happening in real time. You know, before you would have to be on a ticker to see data coming in about it, whether it was news data or it was unusual options data or what have you. But with it being all aggregated here, I mean, this is the same data. It's just we're seeing it in an aggregated way, right? Where we're getting everything that's happening in real time as it's happening. Pretty awesome little feature if you're looking for where a lot of unusual options are coming in. Just throw this up on the bottom of your chart and keep an eye on it. On the left-hand side here, I've got news. And this is something I like to look at kind of in the morning, kind of before the market opens, or just as the market's opening. I like to keep an eye on news stuff that's coming in. Sometimes it's just easier than looking at individual names. I have a tendency just to trade like one or two names, the same names all the time. But it's good to know what's going on out there. And this is the fastest, easiest way that I can think of to do it on the TrendSpider platform. You can, of course, have a news widget for your individual names too. It's right over here. Where is it? Right here. But this is just going to give us news about the name that we're looking at. So this is just news that mentions the Qs, right? This is news about every single ticker out there that we follow that is available on the platform. So quite more, there's just quite more information here that we can get very quickly. Look through a few things. If anybody has anything they want to look at, let me know. Just kind of seeing where we are. Quite the opposite look on IWM relative to the others. Interesting. Yeah, it really kind of feels like money is slowly pulling out of the Qs. Nice little inside setup on the IWM here. Inside bar setup. Data flow so we can see a little bit better. Any strat traders in the house? This is kind of what we highlighted earlier. Looking for a break either higher or lower here from yesterday's high and low. But definitely some relative strength in the Qs. One thing that I like to do whenever there's an index that's selling off, like the Qs are selling off right now, one thing I like to do is I like to see names that are bucking the trend. So I'm going to say price close greater than price open. Put it on the current candle. And let's say by at least maybe 2%. I want to see if there's anything out there. I'm sure there is. One thing else, or other things that I like to do whenever I'm running scans, if I were to run this scan, I guarantee you I'm probably going to get like a ton of results. Let's see what I get. Interesting. Not getting a ton of results yet. Yes, I am. I'm going to get a ton of results. Anyway, when you get a ton of results in a scan, obviously that's not wildly helpful, right? The whole point of the scan is to reduce results, to make your focus a little bit easier, to make the things that you're focused on a little bit easier, right? Yeah, so over 100 results after scanning 23% of the tickers. So let's do some things to reduce the results here. I'm going to add a volume condition. It's one of my favorite ways to reduce results. So I'm going to say daily volume is greater than a constant value of 1 million. And then I'm going to say price close, daily price close, greater than a constant value of, let's say, I don't know, 20 bucks. So we're filtering out all stocks under 20 bucks. We're filtering out all stocks that don't trade at least 1 million shares per day on average. And now we'll see if any names are bucking the trend of the Qs right now that are inside the NMS. And my guess, it's going to be quite less. Oh, okay. So interesting, Rashad. I've just heard back from our development team on your question regarding bullish, bearish, neutral. Now, we don't know. These labels they come directly from Benzinga. So this is actually a question for Benzinga. Even our developer does not know exactly what that label means. I'm going to assume that it's what we suspect. I'm going to assume that if something is labeled bullish, it's a bullish positioning. If something's labeled bearish, it's a bearish positioning. That's how puts can be labeled bullish, right? And that's how calls can be labeled bearish, as if they're sold instead of purchased. TVTX, bucking the trend of the Qs here. Travere Therapeutics. LI, I believe, is a automaker, Chinese automaker. MRTX doesn't really look all that great, but it's not dumping like the Qs are. Huh. So not much out there, in essence. So we would have to dig in, Rashad, we would have to dig in with Benzinga and find out exactly how they're defining those labels. NXT. It's like a new IPO. All right, y'all. Well, I'm going to jump up out of here. The hour has come to a close. Does anybody have any last minute things before I go? If you do not, that is totally a-okay. But if you do, I'm happy to hang out here for as long as y'all need me to. If you do not already, please like and subscribe to this channel. It allows me to continue being here doing these things with you guys. And I do love doing these every morning. Or not every morning, Tuesdays and Thursdays. On Thursday, I'm going to be live a little bit earlier because we've got GDP and we've got jobless claims on Thursday. So the old economic calendar is your best friend if you are trading the markets these days. I recommend this one, the Market Watch Economic Policy Calendar. This one is my go-to. But on Thursday, we got GDP at 8:30 Eastern. We have jobless claims at 8:30 Eastern. These will be two items that could move markets. So I will be live probably 8 a.m. Eastern time on Thursday. We dig it into kind of where the markets are positioned ahead of the announcement, and then we'll watch the results. We'll watch how the announcement affects markets. And yeah, we'll just be generally talking market shop, answering any TrendSpider questions that you guys might have. So do feel free to subscribe so that you know when I'm live next. And throw me a like, please throw me a like. All of these things help me, get to continue doing this for y'all. So every little bit helps. I do appreciate it. And then tomorrow I will be on, if you're on Twitter, I will be on Spaces at 12 p.m. Eastern time, lunchtime, just talking general market shop with a handful of friends. So join us for that little round table conversation. We try to do those once a week and just catch up with trader friends of ours, investor friends of ours, all different types of people come on the show. We've got a good group tomorrow, so it should be fun. Yeah. All right, y'all. Well, no questions came in, so I'm going to jump up out of here. Thank you so much for hanging out with me this morning. If you are trading out there today, be safe, be careful, manage your risk and trade them well. And we will see you again on Thursday morning, 8 p.m. Eastern time, right here. I will be live for that GDP announcement and the jobless claims. And again, tomorrow on Twitter, 12 p.m. Eastern. Join us. We'll be having a good time chatting with some friends. All right, y'all. Have a great rest of your day. We'll see you soon. Take care.